I'm happy to read to you a story written by the Greek prose writer Elias Papadimitrakopoulos. Elias Papadimitrakopoulos. It's taken from his book Toothpaste with Chlorophyll and Maritime Hot Baths, a double volume published by Coyote Arts in New Mexico. Here is the story called Glykeria, which in Greek also means sweetness, sugary. Glykeria. My uncle talked to us so often about Glykeria that we all considered her a member of the family. She was apparently, as he used to repeat, very beautiful, blue-eyed, soft-skinned, tall, slender, ever smiling like a child. My uncle had a portrait of her, drawn in heavy pencil, gracing his desk. She did look as sweet as her name, though rather aloof, wearing an enormous white bonnet whose wavy brim cast dark shadows across her face. There, inside his study, he often stayed up late at night, writing God knows what to her on blank newsprint, churning out stacks of it. The next day, before dashing out late for work, he carefully locked up everything in the middle drawer of his desk. The things he had written to Glykeria, the exploits he had accomplished in her name. One time he recounted how on one of his tours of the countryside he had come across a gigantic watermelon, which he proceeded to mount so that his picture could be taken. The watermelon was then cut in two with the sort of saw used for felling trees, and half of it was offered to him. "So what did you do with it, uncle?" we asked. "I sent it to Glykeria," he answered curtly. Another exploit involved a parrot. All on his own, he had been dealing by letter with someone abroad, when one day, after much negotiation and a long wait, he was notified at last to report to a ship over at the port, where he was to take delivery of a cage containing a bird. All in a dither my uncle left at noon by train. That evening he bolted into the house, proudly holding a cage covered with a black cloth. He set it out on the dining-room table, while we gathered around to see this bird that supposedly talked. My uncle ceremoniously removed the cover. There before us in the cage were perched, not one, but two vividly colored little birds, hardly larger than common goldfinches. Everybody said, "Ah," though more in disappointment than in wonder. Hoping to dispel the impression the birds created, my grandmother urged him to make him say something. "Perhaps you assumed, mother," he snapped back at her, "that these two little birds of mine would have acquired a knowledge of the Greek language in Africa?" And with that, he seized the cage, marched off to his room, locked the door. He stayed up late at night describing the birds in a series of letters to Glykeria. A few days later, I asked him how the birds were getting along. "Great," he exclaimed. "One of them has already begun to talk." "Let me go in so I can hear it," I pleaded. "No, not yet," he replied sternly. "It's still too early." "Well, then, at least tell me what it can say." "What I've taught it to say?" he murmured, blushing. "I've taught it to say, 'Glykeria, want a coffee?'" One afternoon, as I strolled into our wide hallway, I saw my uncle sneaking out with great circumspection, cradling a dead bird in his hand. He became flustered when he noticed me, but soon recovered his usual optimistic outlook. "It's not the talking one," he reported. He flung open the door leading to the courtyard, vanished. At the end of that summer, I also left the house, for good as it turned out, without ever managing to see that other bird. Years later, when I came back to visit the old family home for a few days, I found my uncle looking utterly disheveled and so nearsighted that he almost had to grope his way around from wall to wall. On his desk were still stacks and stacks of newsprint, but that drawing of Glykeria, with her bonnet, was nowhere to be found.